I did not expect the shift to come from Bill. Not like this. Not after everything we have seen him endure and tolerate. But something in him clearly snapped the moment he witnessed Anita fall apart. And from that point on, I could feel the story quietly rearranging itself around his decisions, like a storm forming just beyond the horizon, slow at first, then impossible to ignore. What strikes me the most is not just that Bill has changed, but how deliberate that change feels. He is no longer reacting, he is planning, calculating, protecting himself in ways he never bothered to before. And the biggest proof of that is the will, the rewritten will that suddenly includes Dani, a move that feels both emotional and strategic at the same time. When Dani hears the news, I can almost picture the disbelief on her face, because in her mind, Bill was never going to give her anything again. Not after the divorce, not after all the bitterness that followed, and yet here he is, calmly telling her that he is putting his affairs in order, that Naomi will inherit the law firm, and that Dani herself is part of that future in a way she never expected. There is something quietly powerful about that moment. Dani receiving the painting she once fought for during the divorce. It is not just about the object itself. It is about recognition, about Bill acknowledging something unresolved between them, and Dani's reaction, the gratitude, the surprise. It all feels genuine, almost disarming, and for a brief moment the tension softens. But I cannot ignore the question that immediately follows, the one that lingers beneath the surface of this entire situation. Where is Haley in all of this? Why is her name not mentioned? Why does her absence from the will feel louder than any inclusion? That is where the story sharpens again, because Bill is not acting blindly. He is not being generous without reason. He is suspicious, deeply suspicious, and when he confides in Dani about Haley, I sense that this is not just paranoia, it is instinct. The kind of instinct that comes from finally seeing the pattern too late, but still in time to act. Bill believes Haley is running a scam, and when I think about everything we have seen from Haley so far, the manipulation, the calculated charm, the way she navigates situations to her advantage, I cannot say his suspicion is unfounded. If anything, it feels overdue. And this is where the tension truly begins to tighten, because while Bill is quietly rewriting his will and distancing himself from Haley, she is spiraling in the opposite direction, completely unaware at first that her entire plan may already be collapsing. Lynette's involvement complicates everything, because she is not someone who backs down easily. She is sharp, aggressive, and most importantly, she does not believe Haley for a second. Not the love, not the marriage, not the image Haley's trying to sell, and that disbelief turns into pressure. Lynette demanding her share of the scam is not just a threat, it is a crack in Haley's carefully constructed world, because now Haley is no longer in control of the narrative. She is being challenged, cornered, forced to reveal more than she intended. What I find fascinating here is how quickly Haley loses control under pressure. Instead of calming the situation, instead of finding a way to outmaneuver Lynette, she reacts emotionally, defensively, and that tells me everything I need to know about how fragile her plan really is. Lynette's ultimatum raises the stakes dramatically. Either she gets her cut or she exposes everything. And that kind of threat does not just sit in the background. It demands action, immediate and drastic action. And that is exactly where Randy enters the picture. Because when Haley turns to him, it is no longer about maintaining the illusion. It is about survival, about eliminating the problem at its source, and in their minds, the problem is Bill. The idea of killing Bill quickly, efficiently, without leaving a trace, it feels like a desperate escalation, but also a revealing one, because it shows that Haley's goal was never love or stability. It was always the money, the insurance, the end game. The mention of the colorless and odorless drug sends a chill through me, because it suggests premeditation. This is not a sudden idea. This is something they have considered before, something they have prepared for, and now they are ready to use it. But here is where the irony becomes almost unbearable. Bill has already been warned not to drink Haley's tea, which means the simplest version of their plan may no longer work, and that forces them into even riskier territory. I keep thinking about that detail. Bill being cautious, alert, no longer trusting blindly, and it makes me believe that Haley is already too late, that the window for a clean execution of her plan has already closed without her realizing it. And then comes the turning point that I find the most compelling. The moment Haley learns about the will, because that changes everything for her. Up until that moment, she might have believed she still had time, that she could play the long game, that Bill's death would naturally secure her future. But once she realizes that she is not in the will, that she is being excluded entirely, her patience disappears. Now it is no longer about timing. It is about urgency, about panic, about the terrifying realization that if Bill dies without her in the will, she gets nothing except the insurance. And even that may not be enough if things start to unravel. That is when her decision becomes inevitable. Bill has to die, and he has to die before he can finalize anything that would leave her with nothing. But the more I think about it, the more I feel that this is exactly where Haley loses. Not because her plan is flawed from the beginning, but because she is now acting out of desperation rather than control. Desperation leads to mistakes, to rushed decisions, to overlooked details. And in a story like this, those mistakes are never small. And that brings me to Joey, the wild card, the one piece of the puzzle that Haley cannot control, cannot predict, cannot silence easily. I am convinced that Joey is going to be the one who exposes everything, not out of loyalty, not out of heroism, but because the truth has a way of surfacing when too many people are involved in a lie. Joey revealing Haley's plan to Bill feels almost inevitable to me, because the tension has been building toward that kind of release, a moment where everything hidden is suddenly laid bare. And when that happens, the consequences will be immediate and severe, not just for Haley, but for Randy and Lynette as well. They are all tied together now, bound by their shared deception, and once one thread is pulled, the entire structure collapses. I can already imagine the moment Bill realizes the truth, the betrayal, the manipulation, the fact that the woman he trusted was planning his death. It is the kind of revelation that does not just hurt, it transforms. Bill will not just defend himself, he will retaliate. And given how calculated he has already become, I expect that retaliation to be precise, devastating, and final. Haley's downfall feels unavoidable to me, not because she is not clever, but because she has underestimated the people around her. She believed she was the smartest one in the room, and that belief is now turning into her greatest weakness. Randy, who once seemed like a useful ally, will likely become a liability, someone who cracks under pressure, someone who makes a mistake that exposes them all. Lynette, driven by greed and impatience, has already destabilized the plan beyond repair. Her threats forced Haley into action too soon, and in doing so, she may have sealed all of their fates. And Haley herself, caught between fear and ambition, has pushed the situation to a point where there is no safe way out. The tragedy of it all is that it could have gone differently if Haley had waited, if she had maintained control, if she had not allowed Lynette to get under her skin. But that is not the story we are watching. We are watching a collapse, a slow unraveling that is now accelerating toward its conclusion. And as I look at all these moving pieces, Bill's quiet transformation, Dani's unexpected inclusion, Naomi's inheritance, Haley's desperation, Lynette's aggression, Randy's involvement, Joey's potential betrayal, I cannot help but feel that everything is converging toward a single explosive moment, a moment where the truth comes out, where alliances shatter, where consequences are finally faced. I do not believe Haley's plan will succeed, not anymore, not with so many variables working against her, not with Bill already on guard, not with Joey ready to expose the truth. If anything, I believe her plan will backfire in the worst possible way, turning her from the orchestrator into the victim of her own scheme. And when that happens, when the dust settles, I think we will see a very different Bill, one who is no longer reactive, no longer trusting, but fully in control of his world. In a strange way, this entire situation, the betrayal, the manipulation, the near-death experience, it may end up making Bill stronger than ever. And for Haley, Randy, and Lynette, it will be the beginning of the end, not just of their plan, but of their freedom. Because in stories like this, deception always comes at a cost, and sooner or later, that cost has to be paid.